The ultimatum clock began before we arrived. Admiral Mara Kepler stood under the cyclopean glare of the flag console and watched the red numerals bleed down across every Allied screen in the Selfer Gap. The hegemony's doctrine rode in those digits: comply or be cut. 30 minutes to abandon the convoy. Ion Tang burned softly in the bridge air as coolant lines hissed and settled in their brackets. The fleet mind Quorum braided 100 sensor feeds into one calm ribbon on her display. 6 freighters, 2 hospital tenders, and a barreled fueler huddled behind escort hulls whose radiators already shimmered with heat ghosts. Ultimatum broadcast repeats in 40 seconds. Comms Ensign Malik Ortiz said, eyes silvered by console glare, public channels, unencrypted. They want witnesses. The bridge deck hummed with the steady ship heartbeat fans. Pumps. The faint vibration of the spine truss singing through boots. Mara pinched the bridge of her nose and breathed the clean metallic edge of the air scrubbers. She could hear the fueler's captain on sideband. Not words, only the rhythm, short, clipped, trying to stay brave for a crew that understood clocks too well. We don't trade lives for lessons. Quorum, Mara said, shoulders square in her harness. Who's issuing the doctrine today? The AI's voice arrived like soft cloth over stone, layered with the subharmonics of 1,000 antennae, reading back the void. Ultimatum source, Vessian hegemony, task wall Kestrel. 9 cruisers, 32 corvettes, 1 command carrier. Their lines show expanded thermal buffering. They plan to wait us out. Tactical Officer Sarah Vance swiped in a new panel, her fingers steady despite the slight tremor of a coolant pump cycling behind the bulkhead. They're extending an open corridor to the asteroids. She said, it's a funnel. If we run, we bleed into a killbox. Options, Mara asked. XO Commander Jinrao leaned forward, elbows planted, the faint scent of coffee bitter in the recycled air. We could rush the line and punch a seam with focused burn decoys, he said. Our armor takes bruises. The tenders hide behind us. Sarah shook her head, short hair catching the cold console light. They'll tighten the corridor and salt it with grav pins. We'll burn fuel, and they'll count the minutes for the audience. The ultimatum timer rolled past their 0:28:51. Mara felt the numbers nestle in the back of her throat like a swallowed stone. Turn their own threat into our corridor. Quorum layered a mesh of pale glyphs over the map. We've been pre-positioning prism buoys on inert drift. The fleet mind said, their fire control expects our heat and silhouette. It doesn't expect their emissions coming home dignified and polite. Mara nodded once. A quiet snap. Mirror lattice, she asked. Better. Quorum replied. A warmer tone under the calm. A return grid that doesn't imitate. It quotes. We fold their ranging pings into a chorus they authored. The hull underfoot thrummed as thrusters trimmed their attitude, and a faint scent of warmed insulation reached the bridge. Before we jump clever, Mara said, we remember who's watching. Her eyes swept the status panes, the hospital ships, the drum-bellied fueler, the freighters stacked with seed vault modules and clean water plates. A whisper of static touched her cheek. It was nothing, just air moving, but it felt like applause from people not yet saved. She flicked a channel live. Convoy, she said, voice even. This is Admiral Kepler of Allied Response Group 12. We see the clock. We are not leaving you. Put the cost on the sender. Civilian voices came back, small and human and stubborn. A hydroponics tech in a stained orange smock asked if she should keep the grow racks humidified in case of hard maneuvers. A father on Tender Argo wanted to know if his son's anti-grav braces would keep working during ECM. The fueler's engineer reported a slow seep in the primary splice, but promised she could refit with tape and prayer until Alpha Doc, a medic, soft-voiced, asked whether they should sedate the anxious to spare them the countdown. An older woman recited a little poem about standing quietly in storms. Mara didn't recognize it, but she felt its rhythm lay cool over the bridge heat. A boy whispered, not knowing his mic was hot, "Is the Admiral scared?" His mother hushed him. Mara keyed back, the bridge lights putting dull prisms in her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Fear is tidy. It keeps our hands right." She heard the medic laugh once through a nose. The sound cut gently and left the air cleaner. She closed the channel and let the bridge settle into the hum of focused work, the faint ozone taste of ready capacitors building in the vents. See them on open channel, no shadows. The hegemony broadcast rolled out again, crisp and surgical. To convoy assets within Selfer Gap comply and power down within 20 minutes. Any escort interference will void humanitarian standings. Any attempt to distort lawful lanes will result in Mara cut the audio and left the captions. "Sarah," she said, "prep the decoy skins and drape them thin. I want our escorts to look hungrier than they are. Jin, set the prism drift to creep and let Quorum hum our signature through their own ear." The deck creaked like old wood in winter as thermal load shifted across braces. "Admiral," Quorum said, "I can show them something. There's a channel they always keep open. I can place a sum where they must look." Mara sucked the side of a tooth, tasted the iron ghost of recycled water. "A bill," she asked. "A plain tally." Quorum said, "Not accusation, only arithmetic. Energy spent on enforcement against flagged humanitarian hulls. Delay cost in perishable cargo. Cryo maintenance burned to the minute, all derived from their own beacons." Mara felt something warm light beneath her ribs. "Put it in their house." "Quorum," she said. "Hang it in their foyer." "We keep the line human." "Heat to budget?" Sarah asked, glancing back. Slit-thin smile. "Some bruises are good television," Mara replied. "Give them a story they cannot edit without showing the scissors." Ortiz lifted a hand. Hesitant. "We risk their retaliation on the hospital tenders if they feel mocked." Quorum's tone softened, like a hand flattening wrinkled paper. "We will not taunt," the AI said. "We will measure. Numbers don't sneer." Jin smiled with only one corner of his mouth. "They sure irritate." The bridge laughed once, not for long, but enough to pull the tension like thread through a needle. The ultimatum timer bled to 0. 19:10. Mara could hear her own pulse under the sound of the ship low, thick, almost agricultural. "Bring Indus forward," she said. "Her radiators can fake a fever. Alabaster and Pike run cold behind her, profiles tucked." Sarah's hands moved, and the 3 destroyers flexed into position. Heat shimmer wavered across Indus's gold panels. The camera feed made a watercolor out of real metal. "Indus confirms," Ortiz said. "Captain Ligari says she's comfortable getting ugly." Mara's palm warmed against the armrest. The fabric there was worn smooth by old decisions. "Make the invoice public," the hegemony line corrected. Little ticks in their vector fields, a closing bracket. Jin's mouth flattened. "They're narrowing the so-called corridor," he said. "Predictable." Quorum sang a soft subsonic note only the chairs seemed to hear. And a cloud of prism boys touched thrusters and drifted exactly the wrong way wrong for anyone who trusted the visible. Fire control parity engaged. Quorum said, "They will see a kindness that looks like us." Mara anchored herself with a slow breath, tasted plastic and the bitter ghost of a sealed compartment somewhere warm. Opened convoy channel again. She said, "Everyone, you'll feel a false lurch. It's a trick mirror, don't chase it. Keep your hands slow and your straps honest." A murmur of replies rolled back affirmatives. Small jokes, a baby's hiccup, the clink of a wrench, a prayer half in a language Mara didn't know. She thought of her mother's kitchen on Ceres Station, the steam from the kettle fogging the cold window, the smell of citrus peels drying on the rack. The memory steadied her hands more cleanly than training. Their trigger admits who pays. The hegemony broadcast flickered just a breath, but the timer kept crawling. They felt it. Sarah said, "Do they understand?" Ortiz whispered. Quorum's voice roughened with a new layer, the sound of data rubbing its own skin. They see ghosts of themselves where they expected only us. The AI said. Their calibration routine just stamped its heel. Jin leaned close to Mara, voice low. Once they shoot, they own the math. That's the flip. Mara nodded. We keep them talking until they can't without showing teeth. A tiny alarm blinked from the aft panels, 2 notes, then silence. Sarah's eyes flicked. Pressure creep in Indus's port exchanger. She said, "She can carry it, but her outer panel is going to freckle." Mara's jaw tightened. "Log it," she said, "and make sure the crew knows I saw it." The deck cooled a fraction underfoot as a radiator bank took load. Mara's toes curled in her boots. The ultimatum clock slid past over 01430. Somewhere in that span, a child was likely asking a question about dinner time, and it mattered. Numbers teach when ships survive. Signal from Kestrel, Ortiz said. New demand evacuate the tenders entirely to their custody. They'll safeguard civilians. The word hit the bridge like a bad smell. Jin swore softly. Sarah's mouth hardened to a line. Mara said nothing for 3 heartbeats, letting the taste of old copper at the back of her tongue fade. "Send our tally," she said. "Put it right on their beacon ID. No commentary. No music. Just the sum." Quorum moved. A brush stroke through the dark. On Kestrel's command channel, visible to every ship's audit log, a simple page appeared. Kilojoules spent to point weapons at humanitarian hulls, a rolling number. Cryo runtime wasted due to delay, a neat line with minutes and calories. Perishable medicine half-life eaten a clean percentage. No slogans. The sulfur gap watched math. The ship under Mara's boots gave a tiny sympathetic shiver, like steel exhaling. A faint sweetness drifted through the vents. Someone had opened a coolant valve too quickly, and the additive put winter in the air for a second. "We don't bolt the door, we show it." "Admiral," Sarah said. A hand to her headset. Indus reports 2 crew heat burns on the panel crew. Minor. They want to finish their theater. Tell them I know their names. Mara said, "Tell them the picture is working." Ortiz nodded, eyes slick with reflected numerals, and spoke quickly into his mic. Quorum's field turned half a degree. They are shifting to wand shots. The AI said, "Precise, public, moral sounding," acing their test in front of themselves. Mara flexed her hands open and closed, feeling the soft rasp of glove interior fabric against skin. "Let them ace," she murmured. "We'll grade fairly. Jin looked at her sidelong. When they realize the grade is stapled to their own ledger, they'll flinch. She didn't blink. Good. Flinches save lives. The deck trembled one shallow wave through the spine and then stilled. Countdowns cut both ways. A civilian vignette followed in the quiet before the exchange. A nurse on tender Argo laced a little boy's shoes tighter and told him his job was to keep the laces brave. A water tech on Citronia adjusted the mineral mix and apologized to the fish in the tank, promising they'd get new water soon. The fueler's engineer sang 2 bars of a work song about pipes keeping secrets and tapped the splice with the back of her knuckles like wood. A hydroponics apprentice misted a row of basil cuttings and whispered that basil liked storms. They grew pepper in their sleep. A tired father measured out cough syrup and tasted it first, then grimaced theatrically at his daughter until she laughed. An old pilot in a cracked chair tightened his collar and told the hull, "You and me, we've seen clocks before." A cook set aside 6 slices of bread, hard edges trimmed, because someone might only want crusts when the world shook. Kestrel fired the first wand shot a neat line that pretended to be a warning but walked like a claim. It hit the prism field and stepped back into their own diagnostics with a politeness that must have tasted like humiliation. Static scratched the bridge speakers and then trimmed itself. "They're angry," Ortiz said softly. "Anger is noisy. We can map it," Sarah replied. Quorum colored the tactical pane with graceful arcs, each arc a guess that measured itself as it flew. The mirror they raise shows their hand. "Indus," Mara said. "Show me brave without pride." The destroyer rolled a shoulder like a fighter loosening joints and lifted her panels a little higher. Her heat red like defiance, like theater, like a dare to throw a neat punch. The next wand shot detoured into prism drift and returned itself as a line item on Kestrel's public bill. Jin chuckled once, then sobered. "They'll escalate to embarrassment control," he said. And that's when people bleed. "Convoy," Mara called on the open. "We will now look clumsy. We won't be. You'll feel your stomachs rise, then settle. Trust the belts." A blush of nausea wafted up with the maneuver, and the bridge smelled briefly of citrus candy as someone unwrapped a lozenge too fast to hide it. Mara's mouth watered and then steadied. "On my mark," she said. 1, 2, 3. Turn the killbox inside out without firing first. Quorum flipped the field. The open corridor they had offered became a wide window, and behind that window lay their own ships, now filming themselves with their own ranging pings. The convoy slid sideways with a grace that would look like accident on any replay that omitted the quiet math. "They're correcting," Sarah said, fighting a satisfied grin. "Their wand shots are trying to pretend they were always this wide." Jin's jaw worked. "If they go to spread fire, we'll need to show teeth." "Just the gum," as Mara said. "Let them see we eat." Indus's outer panel freckled exactly as Sarah had warned, hissing like soda poured onto hot metal. 2 crew on that panel crew would have blistered wrists tonight and a story tomorrow. Indus requests permission to swear, Ortiz said, half smiling. "Granted." Mira answered. She imagined the sound and let it ghost through her. Very human and briefly necessary. A new ledger opens when they cross the line. A warning klaxon growled one note from the aft starboard monitors. Sarah's hands pressed down. "Saber drone on Vector Delta," she said. It slipped their own arc. "It's going for the fueler's splice." The ship felt suddenly warmer. Though the air temperature hadn't moved, fear heated skin efficiently. "Quorum," Mara said. Can we sing that drone out of pride? The AI hesitated one digital breath. We can ask it to report home honestly, Quorum said. If its firmware still believes in tests, do it. Mara said, Jin, move Alabaster 2 ticks forward and left. She looks modest, but she bites. Alabaster's captain replied with 2 tight words, the kind that meant his hands were steady and his stomach was not. The drone jittered, then staggered mid-space, confusion rippling across its reply, pings like a fish flashing its belly. It rolled, performed the neat little courtesy gesture its training pack had placed in its bones, and turned to report. Alabaster clipped it with a muzzle of inert mass at 20 meters per second, enough to bruise pride and shatter the guidance. Not enough to send knives through the fueler's tanks. We measure, we don't maul. Fueler splice holding, Ortiz said, exhaling too loudly. Engineer says the song worked. Mara swallowed a laugh she couldn't afford and tasted dust that wasn't there. Log it, she said. The names. The seconds. All of it. Sarah tilted her head, listening beyond the room. Kestrel is angry quiet, she said. The kind of quiet that comes before slogans. A soft drift of vapor kissed Mara's cheek. A valve somewhere was overcooling, and the air felt briefly like standing near a river in winter. Quorum's voice slid lower. They are building a statement. It will include the word order 4 times and stability twice. The AI said. Jin's mouth twisted. We should answer with a picture. Mara nodded. Give me the frame, she said. Make sure the world sees the freckled panel and the hands that burn to keep the show clean. Quorum obliged. The tactical suddenly skinned with a lean visual indices scarred panel. The neat rolling math in Kestrel's foyer. The convoy moving with clumsy grace that looked like real life. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Admiral, Sarah said, voice low. Kestrel just ordered a timed push on the corridor mouth. 30 corvettes lean in and pretend to block rescue boats. It's a performance assault. Mara's heart thumped once hard against her chest, like a hand on a bulkhead. We'll need a second act, she said. Quorum, give me the beginnings of Corridor Theta. The AI hummed, a clean string, not the full trap. Quorum said, a foretaste. We will show them the door they think they hold, and then we will ask them to be the first to walk through. Convoy, Mara said on open. You will see fast ships approach in groups of 5. They will pose like lifeguards. They will not help you. Do not wave. Do not accelerate toward their paint. A child giggled on the line, then tried hard to stop. We'll wave later, Mara added. At breakfast. The bridge air tasted of warm plastic and faint lemon. Someone had wiped a screen clean and left the scent behind. We keep breakfast in the future. The corvettes slid into their picture like handsome liars. Prism drift caught their glances and made them blush at themselves. A second Saber drone twitched toward the hospital tender, then faltered as Quorum set an audit light in its eye. It is ashamed, the AI said, almost surprised. It was told it would save people. Alabaster moved again, not a strike this time, merely a looming presence with big shoulders and a patient face. Timer at 000902, Ortiz said. The bridge listened to the number roll like slow rain against glass. Sarah, Maris said. How long can Indus hold that fever? Sarah checked, eyes narrowing with a tiny wince. 7 minutes before the freckles become a rash. We'll need to vent heat in a hurry, or we'll cook the hinge. Understood, Mara said. Tell Ligari I owe them cold drinks and quiet rooms. Wait your courage. Don't spend it wild. Kestrel spoke again. Voice clean and beige. Allied Response Group 12 is interfering with lawful safety procedures. It said. The captions plain. You have 7 minutes to comply. Failure will result in removal of your capacity to endanger civilians. Jin spat into a cloth and folded it without looking. They intend to stage a disabling hit and call it a mercy. Sarah's jaw set. We can't let them pick the camera angle. Mara let the hum under her boots climb through her legs like a ladder. Quorum, she said. Show the world what happens to a corridor when nobody believes it. The AI's tone brightened. The inside out. Quorum said, partial reveal. We present the path, then pull the walls, so they discover the floor. Do it, Mara replied. Jin, on my mark. We move the convoy as if they had just agreed to the corridor. Make it look clumsy. Jin smiled without teeth. My favorite choreography. The courteous trap is built from their etiquette. Quorum extended a long, thin thread from the prism drift, a line that said this way with the accent of Kestrel's own pings. The corvettes glided to guide and met their own reflections. Not pretty, only exact. The corridor mouth seemed to widen, but it was only perspective turning polite hands to flailing arms. The convoy dipped, rocked, and then slid between two escorts who realized too late they were escorting each other into a space without author. 3 seconds, Sarah whispered. Indus vent in 5. Ortiz added, palms damp on the console edge. The ship's hull gave a tender groan as heat dumped through a half-open fin, and the bridge smelled briefly of hot dust. Spots turning to rash, Sarah said, voice careful. Captain Ligari knows. Panel crew in cooling sleeves. 2 new burns. Surface only. Mara breathed in through her nose until the ache eased. We pay costs openly and keep receipts clean. Kestrel finally dropped charm. The next wand shot was not neat. It scarred space in a way that the audit logs would have to call what it was. It struck where they thought Indus would still be, and met only air that tasted of heat and old pride. They missed on purpose enough to look kind, Jin said, disgust tightening his tone, but not enough to be harmless. Sarah's eyes didn't leave the boards. They'll go wide net next spread fear. Collect rescues. Convoy, Mara said, eyes on me, not on their lights. She opened a private line to the fueler. Engineer, she said, how's your poetry? The woman laughed, tired and bright. Pipes keep secrets, she sang. We keep promises. When I say the word river, Mara said, vent 5 liters to look like panic. Copy, came the reply, thin with pride. The bridge air's ion bite sharpened, like cut apples. They cannot steal our story if we tell it first. Jin's board flashed a field icon. They've cast a panic net, he said. It's a soft push-induced drift and claim assistance. Quorum spoke. Tone dry. Assistance would be to move aside. River, Mara said on the fueler channel. A white ribbon trailed from the fueler's mid-belly, steam catching light like a bridal veil in vacuum. Corvettes turned toward it with dignified haste. Cameras hungry. The prism field lifted a little and then set down somewhere else, as if embarrassed. 2 corvettes found themselves guiding each other into a graceful loop that brought their opening statements into their own cameras. Ortiz's knuckles tapped rhythm on his console. Clock at Soros 0540, he said. The deck sang a tiny harmonic and then swallowed it. The air tasted briefly of burnt sugar. Someone had overloaded a tiny panel light. We will outlast their script. Sarah's eyes moved like needles. Stitching vectors. Admiral, we can start laying the bones of the system scale flip, she said softly. Nothing big. Just seed the anchor buoys. Mara's mind moved there easily. Muscle and memory. Do it without saying it out loud, she said. Quorum knows the quiet way. The fleet mind hummed in a scent that felt like a blanket laid straight. Anchors will be family stars. Admiral. Quorum said, no one watches a family star change places. We will. Convoy, Mara said, voice lower. The next 5 minutes are all posture. If anyone prays, pray for boring. A child's voice, different one, said, I will pray for bread. An adult snorted gently. A good sound. Mara's teeth clicked together once as the deck lifted hair under her uniform with static. The ultimatum clock slid to 00420 and found, perhaps for the first time today, that it had become background noise. The thing about clocks is they're honest. Kestrel changed plans without saying so. Its corvettes peeled back, not retreating. Just loosening the picture so cameras could pretend to see benevolence. Ortiz read off the new caption on their channel. They're offering to board. To verify humanitarian claims, he said. Jin's mouth twitched in a joyless smile. They can't bear that our math is prettier than their speech. Sarah's hand hovered over a red control, then moved to a blue. Indus requests a 2-second show of teeth, she said. To keep certain hands honest, 2 seconds, Mara said. A growl. Not a bite. Indus obligingly bared a lattice of drive cones like a young wolf showing adult canines. The cameras saw, Kestrel saw, the convoy saw and relaxed because the gun that doesn't shake is a better neighbor than the grin that does. The bridge air cooled a degree. The ship liked what they had done. We do not forget who we're here for, Admiral. Quorum said. There is a message attempting to route privately from Kestrel's second to me. It proposes an audit exchange. Mara looked at the empty air where the AI's avatar would have been if they did such things. Rid it, she said. Quorum's voice flattened. If I lower our broadcast and accept their humanitarian boarding, they will record the convoy's cooperation and release 5 ships. The rest would be entered into protective custody. 5 out of 9 is a rehearsal for surrender, Jin said. It teaches the wrong thing. Mara felt the old ache in her left shoulder where she'd banged into a bulkhead during a drill years ago. It twinged as if memory were a ligament. Decline, she said to Quorum. Publicly, politely, with a link to the math they're ignoring. Quorum sent it. The bridge breathed in. We don't bargain with half a throat. The ultimatum timer blinked to 00 to 250. The convoy had threaded itself into a mess too orderly to be accidental, held in place by a field of polite lies and honest numbers. Mara let her eyes close for a breath and saw only the afterimage of the map. Lines red and blue and white like arteries under skin. The fans whispered. Coolant valves trilled a little. Footsteps thudded somewhere distant in a cadence she recognized too fast. One slow. A dance of someone carrying tools and doing math in their head. Time to show them the price of their picture, Mara said. Eyes open again. Quorum. Start the public roll of their spread fire fuel projection if they continue posturing for 4 more minutes. No commentary. Let the sum cross with the cryo draw line. Sarah smiled in a way that wasn't kind and wasn't cruel. That line will cross like 2 ships in a narrow lock, she said. Exactly, Mara replied softly. and everyone will see who kept the lock narrow. They chose the stage, we show the lights. Kestrel finally spoke to content rather than posture. You are manipulating public channels with falsified accounting, the voice said. Quorum answered first. Neutral as rain. All figures derived from your beacons and international tables. The AI said. We welcome third-party verification. Ortiz coughed into his wrist, hiding a grin he wasn't supposed to have. Jin's hand so lightly gripped his chair that his knuckles did not pale. Sarah's knee bounced exactly twice and then stopped. Indus vent success, Sarah added. Panel crew rotating. 2 burns dressed. No scarring expected. Mara pictured each face without knowing the faces. It helped. She smelled warm metal again and imagined the scar pattern the panel would wear for a month. A map of a day they refused to sell front row seats to. Log the burns under costs we chose, she said. Send the crew a note with my name on it. The right kind of notice is quiet and signed. Ortiz raised 2 fingers. Half apology. Admiral, petition from Tender Argo's chaplain, he said. Permission to broadcast a 1-minute reading of the math as a blessing. Mara blinked, felt laughter press against the back of her teeth and stay there like good company. Approved, she said. Keep it monotone. Let the numbers be the prayer. The chaplain read joules, minutes, half-life percentages, like a psalm with no theology except diligence. Timer at 0:01:30, Ortiz said quietly. Kestrel is cornered by its own reflection. Jin murmured. Cornered things bite, Sarah said. Quorum's tone threaded steel through silk. Admiral, I can open the first rib of Theta without closing the net, the AI said. They will think we have given them the corridor. We will be showing them their own hallway through our house. We invite them to walk themselves home the long way. Open the rib, Mara said, and do it with their accent. The map changed, not dramatically, only elegantly. A passage appeared where Kestrel thought they had wanted one all along. The convoy seemed to lean that way. Unsteady. Relieved. The corvettes moved to Shepherd. The Shepherds were being filmed by their own open eyes. The ship's fans spun up. The air tasted briefly of penny and frost, and Mara understood they'd be able to hold this posture for perhaps 6 more minutes before fatigue put human hands at risk. This ends soon, she said to no one. We end it with as few burns as we can afford and as many truths as they can't ignore. She closed her hand and felt the rough seam of the chair fabric. Imperfect, trusty. A kind doctrine with teeth is still kind. Kestrel's next sentence arrived late, then too early, like someone rehearsing their courage and leaning on a teleprompter. We will escort non-combatants now, the voice said. Condescending warmth fitted to a threat. The sulfur gap listened to itself breathing the hum of big fans in big ships, the close rustle of straps shifting as crews dug into their seats, the dry tick of a relay somewhere behind bulkhead foam. Mara's tongue found a notch in her molar, a little scar from a long-ago fall in a cargo bay. And she pressed it there until thinking turned clean. The camera always finds who believes their own slogan. Quorum, she said, feeling the smooth, worn fabric under her right palm. Start folding Theta's second rib. We'll need the tide to look like kindness. The fleet mind threaded acknowledgement into a tone you could almost nod to in your sleep. Rib 2 is a current. Admiral, Quorum said. They will call it Providence. It will be gravity on its best behavior. Sarah's eyes danced, numbers glinting. Indus can give us one more minute of hot theater if we bleed heat down the spine, she said. A cooler hissed to her left. The air took on that faint winter sweetness that said pipes were being asked to be clever. Do it, Mara answered. Jinn, set alabaster to dull her paint. If she looks a little shabby, the escorts will relax around her, like men beside a farmer at a wedding. Jinn grinned in a way that folded worry into humor. Captain Yi will scuff her with pride, he said. Ortiz swallowed and wiped his lip with a finger. The bridge's console glare cut clean stripes across his cheeks. Tiger light in a ship without sun. Grace looks like accident when it works. A civilian vignette seeped in as if the ship itself had found a memory. A librarian aboard Citronia. Face lined like paper, folded and unfolded for decades. Opened a thin, battered children's book and read quietly to 4 kids strapped into hammocks, every once upon floating gentler than the hum of the pumps. A quartermaster on the fueler handed out 3 extra socks to crew heading aft and said, "Dry feet make better choices," like it was a sacrament. A young woman on a freighter kissed her own palm and pressed it to the airlock's inner seal and whispered, "Don't you dare let go." A cook scraped brown bits from a pan with a wooden spoon and laughed at himself because it was a terrible time to worry about flavor. And yet it helped. A girl with a paper bracelet counted to 100, got bored, then began again at 20 because it was faster. Show them civilization in the smallest habits. Timer at 0, 50, Ortiz said, voice low in the warm, filtered air. Quorum's mesh drew a path that spoke their dialect back at them, ranging pulses tuned so exquisitely that Kestrel could not tell whether it was leading or merely making room. The Corvette phalanx eased as shepherds do when lambs start walking where the grass is bright. Sarah's board flickered and steadied. Heat freckles at threshold, she said. Panel crew request permission to write their names on the rash. Mara smiled despite herself. Tell them to write, would do it again, she said. The best courage doesn't strain its voice. Kestrel's doctrine preferred arithmetic with only 2 answers. The sulfur gap gave it decimals. We are deploying boarding teams, the beige voice said. Remain at present velocities. Jinn leaned forward, elbows heavy. They're about to stage help, he said. Then film their own heroism. Quorum stitched rib to rib. The trap and etiquette lesson masquerading as weather. Anchors are singing quiet lullabies to their inertial senses. The AI murmured. The air tasted faintly of copper as a capacitor bank charged 3 decks down. Convoy, Mara said. Tight beam to tender captains that rebroadcast to their people. You'll hear knocks that sound like confidence. Do not answer. If your hands itch, fold them together until the itch feels like warmth. A child giggled, then tried to turn it into a cough. Somewhere a belt creaked. Someone tugged their strap once more to mark time. Sarah's fingers hovered and then tapped 3 blue keys like she was reminding the ship it had a melody. Let them walk in first so they recognize the room. The first boarding shuttle surged, cameras hungry, lights washing their own paint to a friendly matte. It kissed the flank of tender Argo and rebounded with a gentle clink that still made every spine in the convoy go stiff. Quorum pinched the shuttle's guidance just enough to suggest humility. It rotated exactly 27 degrees to face its own Corvette wingmate for a better angle. The second shuttle copied the choreography like a student. Indus. Show no fear and no appetite, Mara said. You're a barn door with a spine. Indus complied. Heat shimmer off her panels made the vid look like summer over asphalt. The shuttle's mic picked up a breath that was almost a curse. Ortiz coughed quietly. Timer rolled. He said, "Ultimatum expired." The red numerals turned into a white exclamation on a black background, a choice framed as inevitability. "Clocks make liars hurry. They'll push now," Jin said. He was right. The corvettes widened their one-shots into a soft, accented glare, a luminous carpet that nudged rather than struck. The prism grid bent the carpet like sunlight across water. Two nudges intersected and scolded each other for their manners. Kestrel's next broadcast lost a syllable to static anger nibbling etiquette. Sarah's voice flattened to something sharp. "Two saber drones spinning up under their carrier's belly," she said. "They're painted with humanitarian stripes." "Quorum," Mara said. "Make their stripes official. Put a certification request in front of them. Public." The fleet mind's tone warmed as if it liked the elegance. "Asking now," it said. On Kestrel's own channel, a form opened, already filled with their beacon's data, requiring only a signature that would bind those drones to rescue protocols for the next 6 hours. The drones hesitated like boys at a door. "Paperwork is a kind of shield," Drone 1 signed. Ortiz reported, astonishment widening his vowels. Mara asked. "Two is sulking." Quorum said. Alabaster drifted with grandmotherly patience into the sulker's lane until sulking looked like waiting, and waiting looked like compliance. The second signature appeared in the audit as if a hand had been yanked down onto a pen. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "If they break the paper, we can charge them twice," she murmured. Jin nodded. "They can tell themselves a story. The ledgers won't." "Indas," Sarah said. "Vent pattern Delta. Look tired but not weak." The hiss came as a thin ribbon of frost glitter that the cameras turned into pathos. The bridge smelled briefly of ozone. A junction sparked and then apologized. "Panel burned stable," Sarah added. Crew teasing each other. "So they're fine." Mara closed her eyes one heartbeat and saw the freckles on metal. A constellation of intention. People who know what they're doing make beauty at work. Kestrel's carrier moved to center frame, like a man stepping into his own painting. "This is your final chance," the voice said. "We are authorized to ensure safety." Ortiz chuckled once. Dry. "They think ensure means decide." Jin's gaze cut left and right. Theta's third rib, he asked. Quorum hummed, slowed, then held a note. "It will be merciful, and it will sting," the AI said. The hull shivered underfoot as the family stars the small gravity anchor seeded across the lane, shifted by a hair the human body could feel and the eye could not. "Begin," Mara said. The convoy obeyed gravity and math. The corvettes obeyed pride and camera angles. The two paths crossed as if scripted by a decent priest. Nobody hit. Nobody owned the picture. And everyone had to admit the truth, which was that Kestrel's next move would either be obviously violent or obviously retreat. There was a third option, of course, but Doctrine often forgot the middle child. The softest turn can be a revolution. A civilian vignette threaded into the next inhale. A machinist on the hospital tender tightened a bolt, then loosened it, then tightened it again because he trusted his hands more the second time. A teacher with her arm in a sling showed 3 teenagers how to read the little dancing green line that meant oxygen was doing its quiet job. And none of them pretended they weren't scared. A violinist on a freighter set her bow down and instead tapped out a rhythm on the case. A heartbeat with a flourish. Because the room needed percussion, not melody. A very old woman put lipstick on in a tiny mirror and said, "If they board, they can look me in the eye." A young man with greasy fingers checked on a sleeping dog and slipped a biscuit into a pocket where the dog would find it later and feel lucky without knowing why. Kestrel blinked, then aimed an instruction at its own drones that contradicted the signatures they had just offered the world. Quorum caught the impulse the way a catcher cups a fastball without bruising his palm, and held it up, not to hit back, only to show. Public violation flagged. The AI said, voice even. Third-party audits pinged. On the Sulfur Gap's open channel, little chimes bloomed as independent watchers tagged the mismatch. The bridge air went cooler, as if approval itself were ventilation. Let everyone watch the line you step over, Admiral, Sarah said softly. I can finish Theta. Jin's head tipped a degree, a yes, asking for a plan, not permission to improvise. Mara touched the seam of her chair again, feeling the fray like a rosary. We'll do it without closing their exits, she said. We lead them through their own hall into a room that shows the bill. If they choose to leave, they leave past the sum. Quorum, she added. Translate our math into their internal expense codes. Let them feel this as a budget meeting. The fleet mind made a mused sound that was almost a human hum. They will hate that, Quorum said. Do it, Mara replied. The deck vibrated at a frequency that made the teeth in the back of her jaw itch for a second. The air smelled of something like warmed dust and citrus. A cleaning cloth tucked somewhere still damp. The Killbox they drew becomes a mirror hall. The system scale flip began the way good theater does, with a prop out of sight and a line you think you've heard before. Anchors shifted again. The family stars becoming a tide that led every Kestrel ship into sight lines where their own beams traced their own faces first. The corridor widened, then became floor, then became an audit table. Sarah didn't smile. Laughter would have been cruelty. Jin breathed like a runner crossing a line and seeing he has more legs than he thought. Convoy, Mara said. You will feel light a second longer than you like, then heavy a second longer than you want. That means it's working. Bite the inside of your cheek if you need to remember your mouth belongs to you. A chorus of copy came back, sing-song in at least 7 accents. Ortiz's screen flashed 3 colors, then consolidated into an orderly ledger, a word Mara refused to speak aloud now because it would sound like victory too early. We are not here for victory. We are here for exit. Kestrel fired a fan of guidance corrections, which is what power calls coercion when explained to a board committee. The fan hit the prism tide and came back with labels attached kilojoules, minutes wasted, hazard percentages. Their own corvettes caught the additions on their HUDs and, for a beat, flew straighter than doctrine. They're seeing the costs in units they can't make pretty, Jin said. Sarah exhaled through her nose. That makes commanders growl and treasurers swear. Ortiz snorted. Same people here. The first plan-changing escalation arrived not by Kestrel's will, but by its software. The carrier's auto-protection routine, seeing danger in its own broad nets, pinched hard and forced 3 corvettes to lurch into a lane that looked like safety and acted like shame. 2 scuffed paint. 1 kissed a prism boy with a thunk you could feel in the soles if you were in the right ship. The bridge's floor thrummed. A locker somewhere clicked closed without being opened. Minimal contact. Sarah confirmed. No breaches. A dozen bruises and a budget embarrassment. Embarrassment is cheaper than blood, Admiral, Quorum said in that gentle cloth tone. Kestrel's back channel is frantic. They are deciding whether to double down publicly or claim miscommunication. Mara pictured a boardroom with stale coffee and a big screen pretending to be neutral. Give them a door out of the doctrine, she said. A sentence they can say without eating glass. Quorum prepared it a small statement acknowledging unintended escalations and a pledge to submit to an immediate third-party audit of enforcement energy against humanitarian lanes. Jin raised one eyebrow. Now we're teaching. We're setting a table, Mara said. They can sit down without bowing. Sarah rolled her shoulders. A quiet pop. Indus reports one cracked hinge pin on the outer panel, she said. Cosmetic until it isn't. They request permission to look ugly for 2 hours after we're done. Granted, Mara said. Tell Ligari to make ugly fashionable. The humble ship is a lesson all by itself. A second escalation stitched itself into the picture when Quorum pinged the independent auditors and got an answer from places usually asleep at this hour. Micro trusts, law clinics, even a guild of longshoremen out of Deneb with nothing better to do than watch people pretend to be gods wrote little notes that sounded like hymns for the secular received. Logged. Visible. The sulfur gap filled with the soft clatter of public pens. Admiral, Ortiz said. Kestrel's second just asked for a private voice with you. Mara didn't sigh. Public or no, she said. We'll hear them with grace. The voice that arrived was tired and made of good schooling. Admiral Kepler, if we release the tenders and 5 freighters now and keep only the fueler for inspection, will you stand down? Your audit theater? Mara felt the bridge's filtered air against the back of her throat. Cool and very clean. No, she said softly. We don't trade sections of people. Kindness that splits a line isn't kind. However, she added, if you release them all and accept immediate audit under Concord Article 9, we will escort you to a neutral lane and assist you in meeting your own standards. The line went very quiet, the way a room does when everyone is waiting to see who blinks first. The carrier's fan somewhere sang at a frequency Quorum could trace, but no human ear could hear. Sarah exhaled. Jin's fingers unclenched a fraction. Third escalation, Quorum said. They're deploying a stability mask. It will pretend their beams were never beams, but guidance. The fleet mind's tone hardened. It will erase our burns unless we catch it now. Mara felt the heat of anger brush her cheeks and made a fold of it with her mind. Like a napkin you set aside to keep your lap clean. Catch it, she said. Do not scorch their face. Show their mirror. Let liars keep their voices. Take their editors. Quorum laid the mask and the day's math side by side on the sky and let everyone count. The edits flickered like badly healed scars. People who weren't soldiers understood it because they had edited photos of toddlers for light and knew what it was to overdo it. Kestrel's narrative popped like paint under too much sun. The carrier wavered in its velocity. A human tell translated into steel. A civilian vignette set itself at the lip of the final act. A barber on Tender Argo took clippers from a drawer and shaved his own head because someone had asked if he had a spare hat, and he didn't. But he had hair to give. A woman on the freighter with a basil clipped a sprig and pressed it into a little plastic cap and told the plant, "You did good in a storm." A boy with braces on his legs popped the latches and relocked them by touch faster than his mother could help, then grinned at her like triumph could be quiet. A mechanic wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better centuries and said, "If they board, I'll show them how we keep things alive. Dignity in maintenance is civilization." Admiral, Quorum said, "The sentence you offered is being copied by Kestrel's comms drafter. They are nibbling one word." Jin's mouth curved. "They're tripping over audit." Sarah snorted. "They prefer review." Mara smiled without showing teeth. "Let them say review." she said. We all know what it is. Ortiz lifted his chin. Public statement in 30 seconds, he said. The ship smelled briefly of hot plastic. A tiny panel somewhere had gotten excited. The ultimatum doctrine hiccuped as its owners tried to swallow it and breathe at the same time. Then Kestrel spoke. We will release all humanitarian vessels and submit to independent review of enforcement energy expenditures. The voice said. It strove for magnanimity and landed on strained adulthood. Jin whispered, door through the hall, as if blessing a friend. Sarah's shoulders sagged an inch. The hardest part of mercy is stopping. Convoy, Mara said. Open channel, voice full but not loud. Hold your positions until we give you the hand. No rush. We will leave with our heads up and our receipts in order. Ortiz's hands shook for the first time. He flattened them on the console so the shake became pressure. Quorum's tone thawed. Anchors going idle. The AI said. The hull lost that sub-audible buzz, like jaw tension releasing after a hard day. Costs, Sarah said. Reading? Indus panel hinge pin cracked. 2-degree misalignment until refit. 4 crew with small burns. 1 sprained wrist on the fueler. Fueler splice stable but ugly. Morale, they're high. Overall time lost 85 minutes. Cryo margin reduced by 9%, but within safe envelope. Mara nodded, the chair creaking like an old friend. Log them under price to teach without hitting, she said. Send copies to crews with my thank you. The air now tasted of disinfectant as medtechs opened kits. A quiet thank you is also tactics. Kestrel pulled its corvettes back with a stiffness that would look like choreography in the replay. The drones, now bound in their own paperwork, hovered awkwardly and then drifted to a position labeled assistance in 6 languages. Jin leaned over. If we let them go without making this mean more than today, they'll practice a prettier doctrine tomorrow. Sarah tapped the side of her screen with 1 finger, thinking. We can fix that, she said, if we set the precedent right now while the coffee is still hot. Quorum, Mara said. Draw up Concord, Article 9, addendum language for the Board of Lanes. Ultimatum enforcement against humanitarian flagged convoys is a coercive misuse of emergency lanes and triggers automatic review and public posting of energy budgets for any blockader within 6 hours. The fleet mind whistled like wind over a bottle. Drafted, it said. Shall we ask the auditors to co-sign? Ask the barber, Mara said, and didn't smile. The open channel chirped signed from a barber who'd just given his hair to a hat he didn't have. Make the rule while the lesson is warm. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Doctrine hates being told it isn't law. Kestrel's captain, insulted by the arithmetic of mercy, tried one last neat cruelty, a hidden reserve of wand shots aimed not to harm but to smear. To fog the record, so tomorrow could pretend today had been messy and therefore forgettable. Quorum felt the smear prep as a itch in its own code, and bristled. Admiral, the fleet mind said, tone now iron laid inside silk. They mean to blur. Mara's jaw clicked. Will not have it, she said. Show them the cost of fog. Sarah's fingers moved. Jin swore softly. Not at them. At the idea of erasure. The hull vibrated like a throat clearing. The bridge lights seemed sharper. Someone had turned up a dimmer a hair. Truth has inertia if you build it right. Quorum took Kestrel's smear and ran the numbers backwards in public, showing frame by frame what the fog would cost in megajoules, in cryo minutes, in edible hours, On tender Argo. Auditors chimed faster now, like rain finding rhythm. Kestrel's smear stalled, then seeped away, then died of embarrassment. On the open channel, the chaplain who had prayed with numbers spoke one sentence. "We see you trying to erase our math." It landed like a hand on a wrist. Gentle and unarguable, Kestrel finally yielded. All humanitarian vessels released. Review accepted, the beige voice said. Now, gray. Mara nodded as if accepting an apology at a neighbor's fence. Convoy, she said. You may now move as I call your names. She called them. They answered like roll at a school that hadn't burned. The fans breathed smoother. The ion tang in the air softened as capacitors stopped coiling for spring. Leave like civil people even when nobody deserves it. They left. Not a charge. No cinematic burn that would win young hearts with noise. The convoy rippled into the seated tide like a choir stepping down from a small stage after a hard song. Indus limped a little, proud of it. Alabaster looked shabby and motherly. The fueler trailed a breath of steam from the theatrical venting, the engineer now laughing at her own drama and promising the splice a proper mend. A last civilian vignette folded the set away. The librarian closed the children's book between forefinger and thumb with a soft, papery kiss, and told the kids the book would be open again at breakfast. The violinist resigned her bow and decided she'd play an awful pop song later because that is what made a crowd generous with laughter. The old pilot in the cracked chair patted the armrest and told it, "You earned your chair." And the chair believed him. The dog found the biscuit in the mechanic's pocket and looked so shocked by luck that 3 grown men laughed until their fear threw up its hands and left the room. The basil got a new misting and smelled like a kitchen when you're 8. When we leave, the room should be better than we found it. They formed on the far side of the planted anchors, in a lane that Quorum had reserved with a juggler's grace. Admiral, the fleet mind said, "Independent boards have stamped the addendum on screens across the gap, on kiosks in dusty port halls, on a barber's handheld." A simple line appeared with a number Concord Board 7-2 Ultimatum Doctrine, unlawful as applied to humanitarian lanes, enforcement budgets public on activation, privileges rescinded for repeat violators. Jin let breath out like he had been holding it since birth. Sarah laughed once, a sound like a small bell wrapped in cloth. The sulfur gap calmed. The hull under Mara's boots stopped whispering and settled into the regular thrum that carried people between dots and called it living. Ortiz rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger until stars danced, then blinked them away. Quorum dimmed 3 displays by 2% and brightened one by one. Small kindnesses that felt like a hand on a shoulder. The law is best when it looks like habit. The convoy rolled toward the exit. Ahead, the way was dull and necessary. Behind, Kestrel arranged itself into a posture of dignity and began speaking to auditors who did not care about posture. Sarah sent Indus a list of repair bays with kind notes beside each. Jin wrote 2 sentences to 3 captains he would never drink with, and each sentence made a point without puncturing skin. Ortiz pinged Tender Argo's chaplain a thank you that said nothing about prayer and everything about arithmetic. "Admiral," Quorum said after a long human minute, "I have recorded names and times and burns and songs. Where shall we keep them?" Mara looked at the screen and saw the rash on Indus, the child's paper bracelet, the barber's bare head reflected in the convex of a cheap camera. "Put them," she said, "where we keep our bread recipes and our tool lists and our maps of safe harbors. Put them with the files that tell a young officer where to sit in a storm. Some histories belong in the kitchen drawer. They crossed the last of the family star's influence, and the hull lost that subtle tug that had been song all along. The bridge smelled like coffee again, now that someone had risked making a pot. The console glare softened as lights were set to boring. A medtech's laugh, low and relieved, carried in from the corridor. Someone's boots squeaked after a spill, and then squeaked less. Mara keyed the open one last time. "Convoy," she said. "Softer. Thank you for letting us do our work. You were brave with quiet hands. Make breakfast extravagant. Use the last jar of something." Tender Argo's cook replied, "I have a tiny bottle of cinnamon." A dozen people said they loved cinnamon, as if arguing joy. Spend joy when you earn it. The fleet rotated to escort. No crowds, no fireworks, just steel and will, and the sort of boredom you pray for. Kestrel's corvettes held back. The drones hovered like scolded puppies, and then found actual rescues to do one disabled shuttle out beyond a puff of dust. One cargo pod with a human curled inside around a bag of bread as if loaves could breathe for him. Audit logs rolled, signing themselves. Little chittering mechanical birds barely noticed on good days. Life preservers on bad. Quorum spoke in that voice it saved for after. "Admiral, the board requests a recorded statement to affix to the new addendum." Mara closed her eyes and saw her mother's kettle steam again against that series station window. She heard the little psalm the chaplain had made from math. She heard the boy asking if the Admiral was scared, and she remembered answering yes and feeling 10 years younger for it. "All right," she said. "I'll speak as if I were tired and not ashamed of it." She stood, felt the decks very slight acknowledge her weight, and let the ship's heartbeat set her cadence. Her voice carried, not like a commander's speech, but like a neighbor explaining where the flood usually reaches. "We didn't win something," she said. "We kept something. We kept people moving along a line that connects tonight's soup to tomorrow's chores. When someone tries to write their doctrine across that line, we will show everyone the cost in units we all understand. We teach with arithmetic and with patience. We don't close doors. We invite people to walk through and see the room waiting on the other side." She ended the transmission and sat. The chair sighed, comfortable as a coat hung back where it belongs. Quorum filed the file. The fans purred. The smell of cinnamon drifted from somewhere it had no business being, and every business being. Because we made it home, we're obliged to make it better. In the weeks that followed, the Sulfur Gap story became a recipe more than a rumor. Repair crews on Indus used oversized washers so the cracked hinge pin wouldn't sing at the wrong frequency and spook new techs. The fueler's splice got replaced, and the engineer saved a piece of pipe on a shelf as if it were a saint's bone. The children on Citronia learned the multiplication table of minutes and megajoules before learning planets, which felt right. Kestrel filed its review with all the righteousness an embarrassed man can muster. And then, quietly, it fixed 2 procedures in its training packs that had been wrong and knew it. The Concord board stapled a public note where even lazy eyes would see ultimatum procedure sunset on humanitarian lanes, violations trigger budget posting, escort restrictions, and temporary loss of docking privileges. It read like boring governance and felt like a prayer answered without a miracle. Make precedent sound like common sense. Mara visited Indus's panel crew in person. The burns were pink and peeling. The jokes were better. She brought cold drinks and quiet rooms and did not make a speech. Only listened to a story about a hinge pin that had wanted to become a musician. Jin took a 3-hour watch on a freighter's bridge and learned that the captain there kept a jar of screws sorted by threads like a collector of precious stones. Sarah wrote 3 pages for the manual called How to Make Good Theater Out of Bad Options. Ortiz slept 12 hours in 2 chunks and woke both times believing he could still hear the countdown, then laughed at himself when the only ticking was his own wristband reminding him to drink water. Quorum reorganized the memory of the day into folders that made sense to people who cook, people who tighten bolts, people who sing. It posted the math for the public to see without congratulating itself for aesthetics. In a tiny file marked Tools, it placed the sentence Mara had given Kestrel, because you never know when someone will need a dignified way to climb down. The sharpest blade is a sentence someone can say. On a maintenance morning with dull light and the soft metallic reek of fresh-cut brackets in the air, Mara stood alone at the flag console. She placed her palm flat, felt the sub-bass hum that meant the spine truss was happy, and thought about the triangles she'd been taught to carry in her head human line, machine calculus, doctrine with teeth. She had tried to keep the line unbroken, let the calculus make rooms rather than chains, and show doctrine its own face until it blinked. She allowed herself one private anger at the thought that she would have to do it again for the rest of her career. Then she allowed herself one private joy at the thought that she got to do it again. She imagined the barber, now cold-headed and warm-hearted, telling a bored auditor that haircuts teach patience, and felt the day square under her feet like a deck you can trust in a storm. Make peace, a skill, not a mood. She keyed a final addendum to the board's public note precedent recorded, teaching method affirmed, budgets visible, doctrine constrained by audit and habit. 2 lines. If you didn't care, you wouldn't notice them. If you did, they would be ballast in your pocket. The convoy signaled back, each ship sending a picture of breakfast. Someone had made pancakes that looked like planets. Someone had burned toast and buttered it anyway because butter forgives. Someone had found a jar of peaches and opened it with a pop that made 3 children clap. Someone sprinkled cinnamon like confetti on tender argot. The barber wore a hat that did not fit, and everyone admired how little it fit. She made herself a cup of coffee that tasted earth-bitter and honest, and sat with it, listening to the hull's heartbeat and the faint whir of a vent. She looked at the screen where the sulfur gap was a tidy geometry now and felt the old notch in her molar again, worried it with her tongue, and decided it was a good reminder not to clench. She spoke into a recorder she did not intend to publish, only to keep for a long day when she needed to remember who she was. "We will always be asked to hurry," she said. "We will always be told there are only 2 answers. Our job is to buy the extra minute with receipts and give it to the people who make breakfast. When we show the cost, we do it without cruelty. When we teach, we do it without collars. And when we fight, it is never to humiliate, only to stop a hand from turning a door into a wall." She stopped the recorder. She took one long, slow breath. She put the cup down and left a ring that would dry to nothing. Blockade lights at the far lane dimmed in an orderly cascade as the auditor's bulbs, once blazing, cooled to a pewter sheen on a rack. We walked them past their own threat and left with everyone fed.